Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about powers of the president and checks on the presidency. So this is a table with constitutional powers of the president. So these would be formal powers of the president. So serving as commander in chief, making treaties with other nations, presenting that State of the Union address, recommending legislation to Congress, making sure that the laws are executed, nominating federal judges, and so on. So these would be examples of those formal powers of the president. And I'll let you read through that table on your own. Just know that the president has those formal powers that are specifically listed in the Constitution, and then informal powers, which would be more like the implied powers of Congress that come from that necessary and proper clause. So moving on to other presidential powers. The president can attempt to exercise independent control over information through executive privilege. An executive privilege is keeping certain conversations, records, and transcripts a secret. So Richard Nixon tried to exercise executive privilege during that Watergate scandal. So he refused to turn over the tapes and any kind of information that he had, and he said that it was executive privilege, that as president, he had that power to keep certain conversations, certain records a secret. The president can also sign executive agreements with foreign nations without ratification by the Senate. So, executive agreements are similar to treaties, but they don't require Senate approval. So, they're typically made under the authority of an existing treaty to deal with bureaucratic issues and minor details. Occasionally, a president might conclude significant international business in the form of an executive agreement. So it's just a way to make those agreements with foreign nations without having to have that ratification by the Senate. An example here would be the Iran nuclear deal. So that would have been in 2015 under President Obama. So he was part of an executive agreement with Iran involving protocols with their nuclear weapons. More presidential powers. So again, these, just like the last two that we talked about, would be more informal powers than formal powers. So the president has the power of a signing statement, and this is when the president signs a bill into law. He can add written instructions to various agencies that carry out that law. So signing statements are more advisory in nature. They don't have the force of law. This just gives presidents the opportunity to express their interpretations and plans for the execution of that law. Presidents also have the power of executive orders, and these are policy directives issued by the president that do not require congressional approval. So these are often going to deal with routine procedures. So executive orders are normally going to be used in the process of carrying out the president's duties. So for example, enforcing the Constitution or legislation that's been passed by Congress. And executive orders are often going to be used when Congress refuses to enact the president's agenda or negotiate a solution. So this is just another list of presidential powers, formal, informal. We've talked about all of these. So let's move on to checks on the presidency. So ways that the other branches of government can check the president and his powers. So it takes majority support in Congress to pass laws and fund programs. So we've said that the president can have his own legislative agenda, but it takes the support of Congress to get any kind of laws or policy directives passed. The Senate confirms the president's cabinet and Supreme Court nominees. So again, we said that the president gets to choose those members of his cabinet, but again, they have to be confirmed by the Senate. The same goes for those Supreme Court nominees. Treaty ratification requires a 2/3 vote from the Senate. Congress has that power to override a veto. So a president can veto legislation that they disagree with, but with a 2/3 vote from both the House and the Senate, that can be overridden. And then the Supreme Court can overturn executive orders and presidential action that violate the Constitution. So the Supreme Court has that power of judicial review. So we talked about executive orders and how presidents can issue those, but they can be overturned if found to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So again, these are this is just a chart with more ways that the other branches are able to check the president. So moving on to the War Powers Resolution, and this is a specific way that Congress is able to check the president. So the Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war, but we've said that presidents can commit troops and equipment in conflict. However, the War Powers Resolution is going to restrict the power of the president to maintain troops in combat for more than 60 days without congressional approval. So the president does have the power to send troops into combat. Sometimes it's better for one person to unilaterally make that decision than it is to get 535 people on board. However, the president can't send troops into war for just years and years and years without any kind of approval from Congress. So Congress has the power to declare war, but the president can maintain troops in combat for a certain extent of time without approval from Congress. So the War Powers Resolution stipulates that the president can only introduce armed forces in Congress or armed forces in conflict if a declaration of war by Congress, a specific authorization from Congress, or a national emergency created by an attack. So Congress last declared war in 1941. So just think about how many conflicts the United States has been involved in since then. So presidents have been able to send troops into action for certain extents of time, but they still have to get that authorization from Congress. Next is impeachment, and we've talked about this a little bit so far. So we know that Congress has the power to impeach the president for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Impeachment is going to require that majority of vote in the House. So it starts in the House where they bring up those charges of impeachment, and then it moves to the trial in the Senate. And then removal from office requires a 2/3 vote in the Senate. So 3 presidents have actually been impeached at this point. So first would be Andrew Johnson, then Bill Clinton, and then President Trump. None of them were removed from office by the Senate. And then the last check would be by the Supreme Court. So as we said, the Supreme Court can overturn executive decisions, so things like those executive orders, through judicial review. So the Supreme Court has the power to check those executive orders for constitutionality, and if they determine them to be unconstitutional, they can overturn any kind of executive action. And that's where we're going to stop with this video.